You're live, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, good evening, members, and welcome to this licensing committee meeting on the 16th of July. My name is Councillor Maldon and I'm the chairperson of this committee. Members, we are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you're giving your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak, and I'll then invite you at the appropriate time. Please don't approach the top table, as this could create interference with the cameras and the live stream. And note the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of your microphone. Therefore, can I ask, when invited to speak, you remember to turn on your microphone, turn it off when finished, and please reference the page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers, and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible if you have any. In the event of fire, a siren will sound. Please use the fire exits marked with the green running man. Fire assembly point is outside the main entrance to the council officers. Please follow me and gather there and await further instructions. Item 2 is apologies for absence.
Good evening, Chair. We have an apology for absence from Councillor Stevens. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 3 is the minutes. It's recommended the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of November 2023, found on pages 5 and 6, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Morgan. All in favour? Thank you. Well, in however many years it is, 14 or so, the first meeting that this committee actually had, I think, was that one in November, and now we've got the second one. So they're becoming like buses. So yes, it's quite unusual. Item 4, declarations of interest to disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members. And you're also reminded that you are required to disclose such an interest as soon as you become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. Councillor.
I hope I get this right. A non-registrable interest. I do licensing for events like street collection and obviously street closure licensing.
That's an other registrable interest.
Other, yep.
Okay. I also have an other registrable interest, as I'm a personal licence holder. Item 5, public participation. I can advise that we have not received any submissions from members of the public. Unless that is mistaken. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to the first report. We only have 2 items on the agenda. And these are basically procedural items that we are obliged to do. So item 6 is the statement of licensing policy from 2024 to 2029. And who is presenting?
Good evening, Chair.
Good evening. Sorry, I should have said good evening. It's very rude of me. Welcome.
As a licensing authority under the Licensing Act 2003, Maldon District Council is required to publish a statement of licensing policy. This outlines the Council's general approach to upholding the 4 key licensing objectives of prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance and protection of children from harm when making decisions under the Act. The Council's current policy was published in 2019 with an intended operational lifespan of 5 years, and consequently it's now out of date and requires review and renewal. Officers have now completed a comprehensive review of the existing policy and have made a number of changes to ensure that it takes account of current best practice and updated statutory guidance. The draft report, presented as Appendix 1, contains a number of minor changes and amendments. A summary of these is provided in sections 3.51 to 3.54 of the report on page 8 before you this evening. Subject to member agreement of the revised policy, officers will now need to undertake a public consultation exercise. It is proposed that will take place over 6 weeks and that we engage with the stakeholders listed in sections 3.6 and 3.7 of the report. Recognising that a review of the policy is overdue, if as a result of the consultation the Council receives no comments or comments of an inconsequential nature, officers would request that delegated authority be provided by the committee for minor amendments to be made by officers, and agreement to be given that this matter be progressed to Council for decision. If this process is agreed, I would assure members that should we receive comments of a material nature, that an updated draft of the policy and supporting report would be brought back to this committee for consideration. And myself and Dan Winter, Licence Manager at Chelmsford City Council, are here this evening to take any questions you may have on this policy.
Good evening online. Members, we have got 4 recommendations. As I said, this is procedural. You've got the new statement or the new policy statement. Are there any questions? Councillor Stilts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick one, and it's really only just to get this in my head. On page 22, 37, conditions cannot be applied to a late 10 if an objection notice is received from the police or authority for environmental health following a late 10, the event cannot take place. Now, does that mean that if I put in a 10's late, I could still get it, but if somebody then says, I've got an objection to that, then it can't happen? So if it's, say, someone's putting in a 10's 2 days before their event or something.
I don't think they can do that, but yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Exactly that. So a late 10 is a particular mechanism. If a late 10 is submitted and an objection or is received from either of those 2 parties, there is insufficient time to hold a hearing, and therefore effectively the 10 is cancelled and the event can't take place.
Okay. Any other members, any other questions? So we have the 4 recommendations. So you agree the revised statement of policy as set out in Appendix A. You agree that the consultation commences for the period of 6 weeks, and if there are minor or inconsequential amendments as a result of that, environmental health, waste, climate action in consultation with the chairperson of the committee be authorised to make such changes to the policy draft in Appendix A, and that sorry, so the email just popped up there, bad timing. That subject to 1 to 3 above, the revised statement of licensing policy be presented to the council for adoption. I so move. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Thompson, I'll let you go this time. And all in favour? Thank you very much indeed. That's excellent. And the next item on the agenda, item 7, is the street collections policy. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the Council's street collection policy provides guidance relating to charitable street collections within the Maldon District, including how we administer the collections, process applications and apply the law and regulations in this area. Our existing policy was published in November 2018 and consequently is also due for review. Once again, officers have undertaken a comprehensive review and made appropriate changes to the existing policy to ensure that it now reflects current best practice and updated guidance. The revised version is presented within Appendix 1. For convenience of members, a summary of the substantive changes to the policy are outlined in sections 3.8.1 to 3.8.8 of the report. The policy is applicable to any person, charity, society, committee or any other person responsible for any collection of money or the sale of an article for charitable purposes in any street or public place. It's important to recognise that it does not apply to such activities when they take place on private land or are those that are incidental to sales which are not considered charitable. So effectively ordinary trades if you're selling something on the street. Subject to member agreement of the revised policy, officers will now need to undertake a public consultation exercise, and it's proposed again that this takes place over 6 weeks and that we engage with the stakeholders listed in section 3.9 of the report. Again, recognising that the review of the policy is overdue, if as the result of the consultation the Council receives no comments or comments of an inconsequential nature, officers would request that delegated authority be provided by this committee for minor amendments to be made by those officers and that agreement be given that this matter be progressed to Council for decision. Once again, if the process is agreed, I would assure you all that should we receive comments of a material nature, that will bring this policy back with an accompanying report for consideration here. And again, Dan Winter is online to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, Councillor Burwood.
It was not really a question, but just something I want to flag up. It is a registered interest of mine that I'm a member of Heybridge Rotary, and we do go street collecting every year with a licence. So just want to make that clear.
And that's applicable to me as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Stilts.
Thank you. If there's a group that are collecting within the curtilage of a building, does that still count as a street collection, or does that, even though they're not associated with that building?
If the building's private land, then
So where a collection takes place on private land, it is for the operator of that private land to determine whether that collection can take place.
Sorry, so if we take the high street and there is one of the shops at the high street and there is collectors on the pavement right outside that shop, is that then classed as a street, or is that classed as private land?
So we get this issue particularly outside stations, on station forecourts, things like that. It will depend on where the curtilage is drawn and where they are effectively operating. So it is dependent on that particular scenario. If they're there with the permission of the shop on the shop's land, then that would be a private matter. If they're out on the designated highway and the boundary of the highway, then that would be subject to this policy.
okay. I mentioned in the agenda meeting, I mean, this is very important because we're seeing more and more people collecting for various things, some legitimate, some maybe not. And I know that's the whole point of the policy. My question is, who polices that? Is it police, or is it our community safety officers? I mean, who is entitled to question somebody and ask for their licence or permit, please?
Dan, do you want to take this, or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the question. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, we can, yeah.
Well, thank you. Enforcement, as we said in the agenda, it's very difficult to actually enforce these, and nationally it is a problem. It would really be down to any authorised officer, whether that be within the licensing department or environmental services, to question whether they do have a permit and permission to be there. Failing that, if they don't, our only power really is to try and deter members of the public from making a donation and generally becoming as much of a nuisance as possible. Unfortunately, we don't have any powers to move them on from the high street. Like I said, this is a national problem that we're trying to create a more robust policy to try and to deal with this. But it is a problem, unfortunately, in terms of enforcement.
Thank you. Another question along the similar lines. When somebody applies and is granted a licence, are they given some form of written proof that they can show? Is there a certificate? Is there a card? What are they given? Yeah,
they do get a permit and written confirmation that they can be where they've applied to be at the designated time and dates requested. So they would have something that they have to produce if an authorised officer questions them.
So the licence is particular to a time, a date, and is it particular to a location?
Yes, it would be. Some street collection applications are a little bit more generic in that they'll request to collect on the high street. Well, as you know, the high street isn't as specifically one spot or one patch, as it were. It's quite a long high street. So as long as they are within the confines of the high street, then that would be submissible. That would be fine.
Okay, and I think the British Legion are exempt. Are there any other exempt organisations?
The policy does outline exemptions. As you say, the British Legion is one of them. The policy does allow for consideration for the likes of the Rotary Club, which we know do a lot of fundraising within Maldon. So, although not exempt, they would more than likely get granted a permission.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thank you. It's really just follow on from that. If a member of the public is approached by somebody seeking to make some sort of collection, I presume they are therefore entitled to ask that person to produce a document showing that they have such an entitlement. And if that's, I presume that's the case, and it might be helpful if such a document can be published so that people know what it is they're looking for and what the spot on that document, such as location and date and various other things. Thank you.
Mr. Winter,
That is correct. Like I said, a permit would need to be presented. There's only going to be one document for that has been issued to the collector, so it may well be that if there's several members of staff, they might not have that document on them, but somebody on site at that location will have a document or should have a document. It is not, what shall I say, it is frowned upon really for collectors to approach anybody, and that can be perceived as a form of nuisance to members of the public. I know in Chelmsford, if that is what they are doing within the high street, and they generally can be quite forceful at times, then we can look to take a different sort of enforcement action in terms of a community protection order that our community protection officers would issue. So really, collectors should just remain in the area, and they shouldn't be rattling or shaking any tins, as that's considered a form of begging, and they shouldn't really be approaching members of the public.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Spencer who want to come in, but can I just ask about big issue sellers? Is that a national licence?
Yeah, they are. They're selling. It's a periodical they sell, and they are exempt.
Okay, Councillor Spenceley.
Do we have something that covers door-to-door collectors? Because we've had several visits from, I think they're called the Nottingham Knockers. They're claimed to be rehabilitated offenders who sell overpriced toilet brushes allegedly for charity, and it's all a scam. And I think they are, in fact, operated as with a gangmaster taking them around different towns.
What we are agreeing, or what you are agreeing today, doesn't really cover house-to-house collection per se. However, that is a part of the Act per se. But there is a problem with house-to-house collections. It has been identified that there are numerous organisations that are collecting fraudulently. Suffice to say that the matter is being investigated at the moment by Essex Police. As we have identified a number of organisations that are of concern, and we suspect that they are not legitimate. Our advice really would be that if you are unsure, then again a permit is issued to house-to-house house-to-house collectors. If they don't produce one, then I would suggest that you just don't make a donation and report it to the licensing department if you manage to get hold of their details.
Okay, Councillor Stills.
Thank you. We do have occasionally people that collect in the high street with an animal.
Are we referring to a four-legged Eeyore type animal?
Yes, with a bag of hay,
Yes.
and I do wonder where that is covered in this legislation as well.
They aren't covered in the legislation. We have written to the owner of the donkey and advised him that should he wish to collect in the high street, then he must apply. It is not likely that he would get given permission. However, we can't really determine that until we see an application with the details of what he's trying to collect and what fault or what cause it's going for. Unfortunately, that is a case for, it's kind of like a responsive situation. If he is on the high street, then he should be approached by an authorised officer and asked to move.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points to add to what Dan has said. First, in respect of the donkey, there is two sets of licences required for that particular activity. One is obviously the street collections policy licence that we're talking about here, the street collection requirement, but also that animal is effectively considered a performing animal under the animal welfare legislation, and there is a requirement that that also be licensed. And I believe that is something that's already been brought to the attention of the team, and that's being explored with the individuals involved. I think the second part regarding enforcement more widely around this, clearly the council has a number of enforcing teams, including environmental health, the licensing team and our CEOs. We are, as part of our licensing service level agreement with Chelmsford, looking at how we can sort of bring enforcement forwards, and that will include this. And there are a number of options which could be considered subject to resourcing, etc. So what, in terms of what Dan was alluding to happens in Chelmsford, we do have a range of powers, including antisocial behaviour powers, that if we have a persistent individual who is not complying with this policy, then we can obviously look to use those as necessary. I think what the policy does do now, though, is it gives very clear guidelines on our expected behaviour of our collectors, gives us very good grounds if somebody is not behaving in that particular way to address it, and gives us really good grounds to challenge. So it actually makes enforcement under other legislation, I think, more practicable.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Stilts, yes.
Yeah, it's not on the donkey. I'm going to ask another question. When I was involved with the late night shopping in the high street, the Christmas fair, we used to have a lot of street peddlers come in, which we were told that we couldn't remove. And they can basically disappear down the high street and come out a different end anyway, but they were selling these substantial goods that glow in the dark. Is there any way that that comes into this where that can be enforced as well?
Selling things, aren't they? So,
thank you, Chair. So the street collections policy is primarily about charitable status, and as I sort of alluded to, there are exemptions for where products are being sold. Nevertheless, there may be alternate legislation that could be applicable, including street trading and obviously trading standards legislation, given the products that they're selling may not be correctly authorised. I think it's probably something outside of this meeting that would need to be taken away on a case-by-case basis, and potentially something for the events coordinators to consider.
Yeah, they pop up everywhere. So, members, thank you very much. We got 4 recommendations similar to the previous one, so we are being asked to agree the revised street collection policy set out in Appendix 1. Also to agree officers to commence the consultation, and again if there are minor or inconsequential amendments or changes from that consultation, the Head of Environmental Health, Waste and Climate Action, I think can we please insert in this one, in conjunction with the Chairman of the Licensing Committee, be authorised to make such changes. And 4, subject to 1 to 3 above, the revised street collection policy be presented to Council for adoption. I so move. Seconder, Councillor Thompson had a hand up first. All those in agreement, please show. Thank you very much indeed. That is passed. So, excellent. Thank you, members. Gosh, it's not too bad. Item 7, any other items of business that the Chairman decides are urgent? I don't have any. There is no reason to exclude the press and public. So, members, thank you for your contributions. I now draw the meeting to a close at 7:52. As the meeting is now closed, members, please leave promptly. I'm sure you're dying to do so. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to everybody.